In today's macro photography tutorial, we're talking about color temperature, what it is, how it affects your images, and how you can use it to create more emotive images. Stick around and I'll get started in just a sec. Hi guys, I'm Ben from Adaptalux and welcome back to another macro photography tutorial where today we're talking about color temperature and white balance. White balance is probably the term that you've heard used more often because that's what it's called in the camera. The camera settings are all to do with balancing the whites in your images. Color temperature, on the other hand, is the temperature of the light that is surrounding your subject. So the light that is entering the camera always has a temperature measured in Kelvin. The white balance is also measured in Kelvin, and you can set that to auto to let the camera decide the best white balance for any particular image. However, things get a little bit trickier when white balance becomes mixed between different light sources and when it changes throughout the day if you're not using auto white balance. First of all, let's take a look at the white balance settings in our camera and how they affect our image. I've just got a little shot set up here. The red that you're seeing on there is actually the focus peaking setting, so it's telling me where the image is in focus, so we can ignore that for the time being. But you can see here that I've got my white balance currently set to automatic. That means the camera is going to decide the best white balance for us, which is nice and easy with a shot like this when our character here, who I'm calling Cool Dave, he is actually white. So the camera is easily able to tell the average of this image and decide that that should be white. However, we have other options in here, and this is going to tell us the different types of scene that we're shooting. So if I go down here, it's going to change to daylight. So the camera knows the white balance setting that the sun produces in the middle of the day. We can then choose things like shade and cloudy. So this is telling us that the weather can actually change the color temperature of the light outside. Then we move into some more artificial options here. So if you're using incandescent lights in your shooting environment, then it's going to try and compensate for that. Incandescent lights are the ones that when you walk into, say, a sports hall or something like that, you get that really orange looking light. So our camera is trying to compensate by that for that by making everything look blue. If I keep going down, then we've got different types of fluorescent lights as well. We've got a setting for flash, underwater, and then down here we have a custom color temperature. Now I've got that set to 5700 Kelvin, and that's because I know that my Adaptalux lights that I use most often are actually 5700 Kelvin lights. Now, if you know the Kelvin value of the lighting that you like to use, this is probably the best way to keep everything looking right. Now you can use auto and it will generally keep things nice and even across a lot of shots. But if, say, the light changes, the clouds come over, or maybe just the time of day changes, then the auto white balance might overcorrect, and then you're going to have a sequence of images that's looking a little bit different from one shot to the next. I like to set my white balance to 5700K because I know that that's what my lighting is set to. So if you've got a uniform color temperature of light shooting outside or in a room with a consistent style of lighting, then setting your white balance is pretty much the basics, and it's all you're going to need to think about. However, thinking about your white balance is always good practice because your color temperatures can sometimes vary, and that's where things get interesting. If you're shooting in an environment with two or more different color temperatures of light, perhaps the sun and some artificial light, then you're going to start seeing different hues of colors in your images. Now these will manifest as blues and oranges, and they can have a profound effect on the end look and feel of your image. And it's that feel that's really important because the warmth and the cold of your image can be very evocative for the viewer. If you have a lot of blues in your images, the images feel cold and chilly and maybe a little bit melancholy, very serious. However, if you've got a lot of oranges and yellows in your images, then they can feel warmer, happier, more optimistic, and more summery, in fact. So using your color temperature can actually affect the outcome of your shots and how you want the viewer to feel when looking at them. This is probably not something that most people think about until you've taken the shot and you're playing around with RAW afterwards, but it's worth thinking about when you're taking your shot as well, because there's some tricks that we can use to enhance these effects and take control over exactly how we want our images to feel. The way that we can do this is by choosing our light sources depending on the feel of image that we want to go for. You can contrast them and you can match them. There's a couple of different ways that we can do this, and with my lighting today, we've got a couple of new additions that make it really easy. So those of you that watch the channel all the time will be familiar with the Adaptalux Studio already. This is the control pod. It's got 5 ports in the front, and into those ports we can plug flexible lighting arms. This is designed for macro and close-up photography, so we can place this down next to a subject and get a lot of light exactly where we need it for macro photography. However, one of the things that's always been fixed with this light is the color temperature. This is a 5700 Kelvin light, and that's nicely balanced with daylight, so you can take that outside and most of the time get a nice natural looking shot enhanced by some white light if you need to fill in a little bit of background shadows or just get a little bit better settings on your images. What happens though if you're shooting indoors and perhaps you want to match the color of a lamp that you have at home, or maybe you just want to add a little bit of warmth into your images? Well, now we actually have 2 new lighting arms that allow you to do just that. We have a warm white and a cool white lighting arm. So we have our standard white here with the white end, and then we have a slightly cooler version and a slightly warmer version. Now I'm going to walk you through how we can use these to both match the color temperature of other lights and also contrast with the color temperature of other lights. And this can be really evocative and interesting in your images to provide subtle hints of color, of cold, of warmth. I'm going to plug some of these in with my little statue of Cool Dave, and we're going to make him feel a little bit summery and a little bit wintry. So here we have a nice portrait of Michelangelo's David, or Cool Dave as we're calling him because of his very cool sunglasses here. And I've lit him with a single white lighting arm. This lighting arm is at 5700 Kelvin, which is the same white balance that I've set my camera to. So this is a nice natural looking shot, and the white of Dave's skin is looking white in our camera. If I were to change that color temperature in my camera, he'd start looking too orangey or too blue. So I've got a nice balanced shot here. Now what's interesting here is that we can start introducing different color temperatures of light. So perhaps we want to make Dave look even cooler, and I can put in my cool white lighting arm and bring in from the other direction a slightly more blue shade of white light. Now it's really subtle, but it can just give you that slight hint of cold atmosphere coming in. Perhaps we want something a little bit warmer, so I can use my warm white lighting arm here, plug that one in instead, and you can see that it now looks like he's maybe stood next to a fireplace, or there's a sunset going down in the background, and we can enhance this even further by changing that white lighting arm out for a cool white lighting arm, so that we're increasing that contrast between the orangey warm light and the bluish cool light. Now you can see that the contrast here is now a little bit more enhanced. We've got a cool light coming in from this direction and a warm light coming in from this direction, and that can give some really evocative, emotional feeling to the image. Now, of course, you can still diffuse these lights as well. So I'm going to pop a couple of diffusers on here, and you can see that they're going to create a softer wash of that same color light. So bringing in my blue white into the left here and my orangey white in from the right. It does make Dave look like he's maybe stood next to a fireplace, or there's a sunset going down, which would create that warmer temperature of light. Now, this is going to be a very subtle effect no matter how you choose to do it. It's not the same strength of color that you get from our colored lighting arms, but this is just a really, really nice effect to use in a subtle way to create those emotional warms and cools. Mixing and matching your color temperatures in your images like this is not something that can be achieved by simply changing your white balance settings in your camera. You need that different color temperature of light in the image shining on your subject to create that contrast between the blues and the oranges and the natural whites. Now, this is not just effective for portraiture like with our little statue here. It can be really effective for things like flower photography, making your images seem a little bit more summery by bringing in some warm light from a certain direction and contrasting it with the natural light that is falling on your flower. Food photography is very, very sensitive to the color temperature of the images. Blues and cold light on things like steak generally don't make that steak look very appetizing. You want a warmer light coming in to make it look like it's sat next to the grill or maybe next to some fire. Now, that is a really interesting way to add that emotion to your images just by adding a subtle hint of a different color temperature of light. There's a few different ways to do it, but selecting a specific color temperature in your light source is the most reliable way to get results like that. Of course, you can still adjust all of this in your post-processing. If you're shooting in RAW, you can adjust them the other way so that if you, say, put a blue light in your image, but you actually want it to look warm, you can shift your color temperature up to make the blue look natural, and then the natural looking light would look a little bit more orange. It gives you a little bit more range to play around with the colors and the feels in your images. These new lighting arms, the warm and the cool lighting arm, are now on sale. We've just released them so that we now have 3 different color temperatures of white lighting arms for you to use in your macro photography. We have the warm white lighting arm at 4000 Kelvin, and then the standard white lighting arm at 5700 Kelvin, and then the cool white lighting arm at 6500 Kelvin. This is a nice range of color temperatures for you to play around with in your images, match to the lights in your own home, or contrast with the other lighting arms that you have. I'll link down in the description to where you can find our lighting. If you're brand new to the Adaptalux studio, we've made some new packs that involve all of our different color temperatures of white. So if you want some nice natural looking shots, but with a hint of evocative color, then you can absolutely get that. If you're already an Adaptalux studio user, you can of course pick up a couple of these new lighting arms just on their own as well. I'd like to know from you guys what you think to this variation in white lighting options that we're adding to the studio, and what you think to my little demonstration shots of Cool Dave here. Let me know down in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video and learned something about color temperature and white balance, do give the video a like. That's all that I've got time for now. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.